Thank you all for joining me this night to hear a little bit about the state of the city. I want to thank Millersville University and the Ware Center for hosting. And a reminder to everybody that after the state of the city, you are invited to join me and your other electeds at City Council tonight at 7:30 at 120 North Duke, just to keep the fun going. We're all here because we are committed to building a stronger and more equitable Lancaster block by block. And it is truly, truly humbling to stand before you at the start of my third year as your mayor and to share a bit about how we are advancing our 4 strategic priorities: strong neighborhoods, safe streets, secure incomes, and sound government. I'm going to share some of the successes and challenges and provide some insight about how we are doing this work. And I'm going to be asking you to help me at the end of this presentation with 2 very specific tasks. So I'm warning you now. Before I get to all of that, I want to recognize the staff, city staff that are in attendance. They are doing this work every day, and I am truly humbled and grateful to be working alongside so much expertise, so much heart for our city. I also want to recognize members of the Lancaster City Council who are in attendance tonight. And I also see that we have our representative Sterla with us, and also City Treasurer James Reichenbach. So if you are a city staff member or representing an elected office, please stand so that we can recognize and thank you for your service. I came into office in January 2018 as climate refugees from Puerto Rico were arriving here in Lancaster. We quickly realized that we didn't have a game plan. We did not have the tools in place, housing, and there was this enormous need that was literally showing up here with nothing. As we were doing this work of figuring out how to respond, we were learning. And we started asking about how we could be more intentional about building a better community, stronger neighborhoods for everyone. And when I say we, I mean city government, as well as the many, many partners that are represented in this room tonight and beyond. Something I know now about this effort is that it's called designing for extremes. And that when you design interventions for people who are most affected, you reap other rewards along the way. This was an opportunity for us to collaborate both within city government and with partners in the community to have this larger impact. We connected people who needed resources with the organizations that could offer them, and this has been a repeating theme for us since coming into government. We used a common goal to bring together organizations who hadn't ever worked together before, and out of this tragedy, new things were born. This past September, after almost a year of work both internally and with over 24 community partners like the Lancaster County Community Foundation, Lancaster was officially declared a welcoming city. Just one of 6 throughout the entire United States, and the very first in Pennsylvania. Thank you. This welcoming city designation recognizes what we all know, that no matter where you're born, you're welcome here in our city. It also underscores the fact that when you build solutions, that thing I was mentioning before about planning for the extremes, to address the needs of specific populations, you achieve benefits beyond that population, creating positive outcomes for everyone. And so we saw this in our neighborhoods as we did this work. 2019 marked the first full year of Love Your Block, a grant-supported initiative that was spearheaded through our Office of Neighborhood Engagement under the leadership of Milsey Carrasco, who at this moment is on her way home from Puerto Rico, where in true Milsey fashion, she was looking and learning and seeing about all the things she can be doing to support Puerto Rico from home. So far, we've awarded 14 mini grants for neighborhood-led improvement projects totaling over $30,000. 19 neighborhood groups have formed, and in a short amount of time, we've unleashed some grassroots love. A little shout out up here to TCP. We've seen investments across the city, and this is what it looks like to love your neighbor. You actually have to know them. You need to come outside, you need to introduce yourself, and there is something that is magical about when you are all working on a project that you have declared as important for your neighborhood, and everybody shows up, rolls up their sleeves, and does it. Whether you saw people painting, planting flowers, working to pick up trash, restoring a fence, these are all things that really build those strong neighborhood connections. Through initiatives like Welcoming Cities and Love Your Block, we also discovered the need for improved language access throughout city services. So we launched a language access program to ensure that city services are accessible to those who speak languages other than English. We also had our inaugural class of the Neighborhood Leaders Academy, where invested residents learn more about how city government works so that they can be more effective advocates for their neighborhoods and their neighbors. They have been bringing their ideas forward for how to build stronger neighborhoods, and they have been making their ideas come to life. We're really excited to continue Neighborhood Leaders Academy this year, and it's expanding. This year, we'll be leading a cohort of students from J.P. McCaskey who are eager to make a difference in their community. And I am so curious about how our high school students are going to think about improving their neighborhoods. I'd like for you to hear directly from one of our Neighborhood Leadership Academy graduates about what the program means to him. Juan Avila spoke at an October City Council meeting where he shared these remarks.
Mi nombre es Juan Avilés.
My name is Juan Aviles.
Vivo en la comunidad de Duke Manor Apartment,
I live in the community of Duke Manor Apartments,
un lugar que es bueno y limpio.
a good and clean space.
Mis vecinos también son muy buenos.
My neighbors are also good people.
Mi proyecto en este sistema es un sistema de reciclaje
My project is a litter recycling project,
y a la vez educar nuestros residentes.
and at the same time to educate our residents.
Durante estas 6 semanas
During these 6 weeks
que estuvimos aquí,
that we spent here,
nos llenamos de información sobre cómo podemos ayudar a nuestra comunidad.
we were filled with information on how we can help our community.
En esto yo he propuesto en mi corazón
I have put my heart into this,
y he sembrado un árbol en mi corazón.
and I have planted a tree in my heart,
El cual ha estado cultivando durante esos 6 días que estuvimos aquí.
which I've been cultivating these 6 weeks that we were here.
So I just love his words about planting a tree in my heart, and the visualization of us coming together as a community and thinking about how we can do this work collaboratively with our neighbors. Oh, let me just get back. So within City Hall, we've been working across departments to address these needs that have been identified by our residents, like those in the Neighborhood Leadership Academy, and those that come to us through social media, emails, phone calls, and my favorite, handwritten letters. Our ability to better problem solve and address community needs has been advanced by data. Building Blocks, which we debuted in 2019, is a data platform that allows us to look at lots of different data at once. Data that had never talked to each other before 2019, from our police department, our fire department, from census data, from county parcel data, tax records. All of this data is now available in this platform called Building Blocks. In fact, how we use data to make decisions has been evolving quickly, thanks in part to the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. I, along with 40 other mayors that are pictured here from across the globe, attended what I call Mayor School in July. I was really honored to sit at the table with mayors from cities like Chicago and San Francisco, Rochester, New York, and Minnesota, Dallas, Texas, Dayton, Ohio. Many cities in Australia were represented, as well as Europe and also Ghana. Two of the executive team members, Jess King and Milsey Carrasco, also participated in this training. They came in August, and it has been truly beneficial to be part of this cohort. I can't tell you how many times I email the BH3, the Bloomberg Harvard third class, because that's what we are, class number 3, to ask questions about all kinds of things, inclusionary zoning, best practices, what we should be looking at related to public restrooms. You might not think about that, but yes, there are best practices for public restrooms. And we were one of the smallest cities in the cohort. There were only 2 other cities that were about our size, Trenton, New Jersey, and Huntington, West Virginia. And this was amazing for me. Participating has, as I mentioned, yielded lots of benefits, but one of the concrete benefits has been that we have a data coach who actually is a faculty member at Johns Hopkins University who is literally helping our city understand and better utilize data. Like many organizations, we are swimming with it, but we are not always applying it in the best ways or looking at data in ways to help us be more proactive. We're also going to be the beneficiaries of a Harvard graduate assistant, so anybody who wants to put up housing for a graduate assistant for 10 weeks, let me know, who will be furthering this work later in the year. And we've also connected with the Kennedy School of Government. Many students in the Kennedy School's master's program need capstone projects, and so we've put Lancaster City on the map to be a destination for those capstone projects because we have a lot of things that we want to do, and we simply do not have enough people or bandwidth to do them all. So we're really appreciative of this effort. This cost the city of Lancaster absolutely $0. Bloomberg Philanthropies paid for literally everything. A big focus of using data like that in building blocks, as I mentioned, is about being more proactive. A very simple way that we have used data is related to eviction prevention. Eviction prevention specifically through our water shutoff program. Prevention program, I should say. Launched this year in conjunction with the Community Action Partnership, we are working to support residents who have fallen behind in their water bills, are facing a turnoff, which means that they're also facing eviction, to be able to provide them additional support to get themselves back on track. This is not just about alleviating a few bills. This is about helping families get access to the social supports that they need to be successful and get on track so that they never have to face the potential of a water shutoff or an eviction for any reason. Another more complicated example is the one that you see here. What you're looking at is output from building blocks of 4 different properties in each column. These symbols that you see represent fire or police calls, utility billing, or tax payments or code violations. And you can see them listed by year. So on the left-hand side, you see years beginning in 2005, going all the way up to 2019 is a little cutoff there. But you can see these 4 properties have a similar pattern of escalation over time. They're popping up on our screen literally more frequently as a progression over this period of time. What's happening here? Where is the tipping point? Is there a way for us to interrupt this pattern? And these are some of the questions that we're trying to work on, and we're struggling through it because it's requiring a level of analysis and tools that we are just developing. And this data is open and available to all of you and to our residents. If you're considering renting a property or want to know if it's licensed and being taken care of, you can check building blocks. Or if you're buying a property and want to see what building permits have been pulled, you can check building blocks. Or perhaps you want to see how many rental properties there are in a specific census tract, building blocks. Our first ever open data platform allows you to explore this data to your heart's content. And let me tell you that the first few days we got it up and running, literally everybody in City Hall was like, did you see this? And did you check it when you do this and you do that overlay, what you see? I mean, it was like, we were like kids in candy. And that reflects the data geeks that are your public servants. So speaking of data, I'd like to give you a glimpse of your budget, our budget. How many of you attended the budget hearings at the first Saturday in December? Raise your hand. Okay, so I would guess that I can't see everybody, but I think that many of you are staff. So let's just talk a little bit about our budget. About half of the city revenue, that big red block on the right, comes from property taxes, and the rest comes from a mix of grants, payments in lieu of taxes, most notably from LG and Penn Medicine, fees, and other taxes. Our expenditures are on the left-hand side. This is just for the general fund. This doesn't include water, sewer, wastewater, trash, and recycling. Those are enterprise funds. They are funded specifically through fees, and all of the expenses that are related to them are supported in those specific funds. This is just general fund. This is streets, parks. This is police, fire. This is the basic administrative services that we provide. So that's our costs on the left. On the right are our revenues. And this, my friends, is our structural deficit. Year in and year out, our expenses increase by about an average of 3%, and our revenues increase by about 1.5%. So every year we are staring down this gap of 1.5%. And this is the structural deficit that is not new. Mayor Gray was staring down a $69 million structural deficit when he came into the city of Lancaster in 2006. Under his administration, many, many important structural changes were made, especially, most importantly, about how we fund our insurance. We are now self-insured, which has saved the city millions and millions of dollars. And yet, this persistent structural deficit remains. And if you didn't see the report from PFM, the consulting firm that presented recently, go back and check LNP, and you can read more about some of the findings related to the structural deficit. And the fact of the matter is that we will not be able to economically develop our way out of the structural deficit. We are going to need to do even more things creatively to cut costs, and we're also going to need to think about how we raise revenue because, and I'm going to talk about this again, we cannot fund municipal services and our local school district from property taxes alone. And you all know that. And we've been talking about it a long, long time. And I'm just here to remind you that this is a very, very important issue. And we're going to come back to this very important issue at the end of today's session when I ask you my one of two things, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the expenses. So 43% of every dollar in the general fund goes to our police protection, 19% to fire. You recall that 49% of our revenues are from property taxes, and we've just spent 62%. So you see already that property taxes alone are not paying for the core of what we are mandated to provide as a city of the third class, which is public safety. 11% to public works, as I mentioned, these are mainly streets, parks, and facilities. 10% to administrative services, 8% to community planning and economic development, 8% to debt service to pay bonds that we have, loans that we have taken out to address our aging infrastructure and other long-term capital improvements, and 1% to the executive, legislative, and neighborhood engagement. One note about neighborhood engagement is that Millsie's department of essentially two are funded, their salaries are funded through the general fund, but most of the programming and the expenses related to neighborhood engagement come in the form of grants. And we are so, so fortunate to have so many supporters of our neighborhood led efforts. Okay, I want to take a few minutes to talk about the Police Bureau. And I was in a meeting this morning, and I got a little pushback about why I'm always carrying around a Fire Bureau cup. And I was like, well, if you want to get me a cup for my tea, let me know. All right, so the Police Bureau responds to 56,000 calls a year. That averages out to about $450 per call. This is a map of all of the police calls from 2019. You can see very quickly that we are responding to 56,000 calls on 5,800 properties. So you know that we're responding to calls over and over and over again at the same properties. Now, some of these are parks and other large buildings where lots of different people live, but this is part of what we are looking at from through a data lens. So we're wanting to understand a little bit more about those folks who are repeatedly calling us for service, and what are their needs, and how can we ensure that we're keeping people at the center of the work, their well-being is prioritized, and we are looking at more effective and efficient ways to engage with these residents. I'd like for you to hear directly from Captain Stebbins, who is our patrol captain, the largest division in our police bureau, who took this concept to a whole new level. Here she is.
The police social worker position or the theory behind it was actually introduced to me through a social work intern that we had here. And then I started doing research. And we may have had, several thousand, 50,000 calls of service, but there were also a huge number of those, maybe 900 and some, that really, if you dive down into it, were not police-related calls. And some of those people were calling several times a year, multiple times. So there must be something deeper that's going on in that home or with this person. I started to realize that there are many families, many people in our community who may need resources, may need help beyond what our police officers, their ability is to provide to them. Those cases are referred to our police social worker, and then she goes out and tries to meet with them, see what type of issues they may be having and how she can help them and refer them to the plethora of social service agencies that we have in our community. It bridges the gap between the police officers and our community social service agencies that we have.
So our police social worker is busier than we ever thought she would be. And we're really appreciative of what she is adding, the value that she's adding to the community, and that she's a resource for officers who show up on the scene in households across the city, and what's really needed isn't what they can offer. And to be able to leave that scene and to be able to refer so that they have some confidence that that family can get assistance is really helpful to our officers who see so much day in and day out. So let's talk about public safety, the other side of the coin, which is fire. 2019 marked our first full year of responding to EMS-related calls that under our former policy were not being responded to. So this all came about soon after Chief Little came on board. He began looking at how the Fire Bureau could improve, and he asked a simple question: does this make sense that our staff are trained and available and are close by, and we're not responding to these EMS calls? And the answer was no, it's not. So our team responded to over 1,100 EMS calls this year in 2019 for various accidents and injuries, cardiac arrests, and more. So do not be alarmed if you call 911 and think an ambulance is coming and a fire truck rolls up. Sometimes we are the closest, and the closest matters. So we're using all of this data in other ways. I talked a little bit about our budget and revenues. We're definitely looking very carefully at our financial performance. We're also looking at issues related to our hiring practices, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a lot more work to go in that area. And we're also looking at this as it relates to public works. And here I want to introduce you to our new Director of Public Works, Steve Campbell.
I'm the I'm the new Director of Public Works, Stephen Campbell, and I'm very excited to be here working with the City of Lancaster as we develop data-driven ways of making more and better public works decisions. A huge part of what we're looking at in a data-driven environment is how do we coordinate the different infrastructure improvements that we make with better awareness of where we put our resources, our limited resources. We're looking at other data to ensure that we are making our safer streets under Vision Zero. Vision Zero being primarily how do we reduce accidents and get to zero deaths so that pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles can use the streets the way they need to. We're looking at data to better design our streets. Where are the greatest needs for traffic calming, for bicycle routes? This is a very proud team that's very interested in making sure that the public in public works comes first, and it's data driven by the public that makes that happen.
So that's a great segue to talk about safer streets. Remember this? Yeah, look familiar? So I want to share a little bit about the data behind this. Northeast Neighbors brought forward a list, and it was kind of a long list, as I recall, of problematic intersections in their neighborhood to the city's traffic commission. One in particular had a higher than average number of reportable crashes, and that's the intersection of North Plum, East New, and Park. So our traffic engineering team, under the leadership of Cindy McCormick, pitched an idea to residents, and they decided to try a temporary roundabout to see if it could reduce speeds and reduce reportable accidents. So we tried it. It was roundly criticized, according to one headline. On the same day, these letters appeared in LNP. Some people liked it, some people did not. But the data doesn't lie. Speeds have reduced, and while these look like modest reductions, more importantly, there have been zero reportable crashes since it was installed. We surveyed residents, and the majority approved of it, so based on the data and the community input, we are working to secure funding to make it permanent. So let's talk about another controversial change to city streets in 2019. Oh, knowing giggles, I love it. The parking protected bike lane on Walnut Street. There it is. So what you're looking at, what I'm about to show you is a series of Facebook posts with the individual faces and names blocked out. Some people love it. It was glorious. Some people thought it was in line with national best practices and posted articles from City Lab. Some people didn't love it and thought it was a bunch of bull. I'll note that we did not select any other more explicit posts for this presentation. Let's just say it generated a lot of conversation. And some people found some other unexpected benefits, like there's less vehicle noise that they notice in their home because they live on Walnut Street. And parents and grandparents found that this was a safer street to ride on now with their kiddos because they were protected. So what does the data say? So here's some interesting data from our Police Bureau and Department of Public Works. From Shippen to Lime Streets. If you guys know Shippen to Lime, you know there's that little crest when you're crossing over by Triangle Park. Yeah, so there were cars that were traveling over 55 miles an hour, 60 of them. After, there were 0. Vehicles traveling 46 to 55 miles were reduced by 2/3. We're improving streets, not just for the cyclists, not just for cars, but we are also talking about pedestrians. And every mile and every car that we reduce, there is a greater chance that if you are hit by a car, you will live. And this is very important, and it is part of our Zero Vision program. It is what underscores the Safer Streets strategic priority for the city of Lancaster. So once again, we're taking both the data, we're taking community input about changes that we're making in our infrastructure. And these were profound changes. Like, this really changed the streetscape. Walnut Street looks very, very different. And we're also being driven by best practices and also wanting to hear from our community, like this gentleman who rides to work to and from West James Street to downtown every day. And we're really looking forward to spring, so we can all get on our bikes. Okay. So you've heard about strong neighborhoods, you've heard about safe streets, you've heard about sound government when we talked about the budget and our expenses and that pesky, persistent structural deficit that we have. The last strategic priority that I want to talk about is secure incomes. And there is by no stretch of the imagination, this is the hardest thing that we are up against. I want to share some of the statistics to frame this conversation. Lancaster has the highest poverty rate in the county at 26.5%, and we have seen some modest declines from about 29%. So we've gone from about 1 in 3 to almost 1 in 4. This is slightly higher than the poverty rate in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and lower than our sister cities in the region, Reading at 36%, York at 35%, and Harrisburg at 29%. 11% of us are foreign-born. Women in Lancaster make 26% less than men. 12% of us are uninsured. More than half of us are renters, and we are young. We are about 31 years old. Our median income is about 2/3 of the county and the state at about $40,000. And if you look at the distribution of household income from 2017, you can see that on the left-hand side, 5,800 households live below the poverty line for a family of 4. The vast majority of these families are working, and that there are very few of us in the city who make more than $100,000 a year. I'm just gonna let you take a look at that slide a little bit longer, because I think that it is so important for us to contextualize the number of households that we're talking about in our city and what this means for our city in terms of its future economic growth, its ability to be sustainable economically, and also equitable. Mayor Gray launched the Commission to Combat Poverty in 2016 to dig deeper into Lancaster's poverty rate, and the commission focused on the fact that it would just take 3,000 good jobs, one good job, for heads of city households to cut the poverty rate in half. Here's the thing, we know that Lancastrians are working, but they don't have one good job. The Center for Regional Analysis took a deeper dive into low-quality jobs last year, looking at the 283 occupations most prevalent in our local economy across a 10-county region in south central Pennsylvania. We see that the distribution of jobs is skewed toward the top and the bottom. These jobs in the low-quality tier at the bottom, the 33%, are people working in retail, they're cashiers, they're laborers, they're folks that are working in our food service industry, they're home health aides. They typically don't require a lot of specialized training or education, and subsequently they have really limited opportunities for advancement. They typically pay less. A 40-hour work week is not guaranteed. I think a lot about Jose and Maria, parents at my daughter's elementary school. Both were working, but both could not count on a 40-hour work week. They got behind in their rent. They had issues with their landlord. They are afraid to pick up the phone and call because they couldn't be evicted. People in these positions are likely to turn over which is a great expense to the companies who are employing them and to the challenges for what that means for a family. These jobs are not prestigious. These jobs are also critical to our local economy. And this is our challenge, is that these are low-quality jobs, and even more so, only 5% of the people that are working in one of these jobs ever climbs out. Let me say that again. Only 5% of the people who are working in a low-quality job, a job that is necessary for our economy and is part of building our county's economic horsepower, ever climb out, ever are guaranteed benefits, ever are guaranteed a paycheck every week that is the same week to week, all of the months of the year. So this is where the work gets really hard. And we have been trying, we, the collective we, city, many, many partners sitting around the table trying to figure out what the approach is. The best approach here would be an educational intervention in which we are supporting families and paying their rent while they could go to school to be trained for a job that was not in the low quality tier. Or that we were working with companies to help them create pathways inside their companies in order for people to move up the ladder. And so I want to talk about two things that are happening that are bright spots in an otherwise abysmal situation. One is a van. Some of you know about this van. So this is a collaborative effort to provide transportation services for city residents, their pickup spots all throughout the city, to jobs at companies that offer more in the way of hourly wages, benefits, stability, and opportunity for advancement. And this bus service is taking employees from the city to High Concrete and Four Seasons Produce in Denver. These are places, companies that run 3 shifts. If you get a job there and you can actually get to the 3rd shift, there is no public transportation to bring you back at the end of your 3rd shift. These are really practical logistical challenges that people face every day as they are trying to support themselves and their family. And this is one way that we are working to make this available. And I would also say this effort needs all of our support because we need to make sure that this can continue, and that is not guaranteed. Another effort, another bright spot, builds on the local B Corp movement that aims to encourage local businesses to become more intentional in their hiring, training, professional development practices, to pay better wages and benefits to workers, and to provide that one good job. Maybe you already knew that Lancaster already has more B Corps than the whole state of Ohio. Yeah, that deserves some applause. And that we are on our way to having the highest concentration of B Corps per capita in the country. And this is definitely something for us to celebrate. The In Good Company effort will be launching next month between Assets, the Chamber, and the County Community Foundation to expand this effort to as many businesses as possible in Lancaster County. So I urge you to keep an eye out for this. It will be happening February 18th, the launch. And we are looking for companies who have been doing good. And we want to highlight them as a community so that we can learn from each other. Our businesses can learn from each other about their best practices and what they are doing to support their families and do business for good. Okay, so we've talked about income, we talked about wages. Now I want to flip to the other side, which is expenses. In this case, housing, childcare, and healthcare costs have outpaced earnings for working families across this country. We are so not alone. It's a little consolation, isn't it? I want to talk about housing because that is one of our most pressing needs in our community. The definition of affordable housing is here. It is housing that costs no more than 30% of a family's gross income. At our median income of $40,000, that'd be about $1,000 a month. Based on the 2012-2016 data, 38% of all households in Lancaster City are housing cost burdened, 38% of all. 53% of renter households are cost burdened, 53. But as you saw, many people in the city live below that line, that median line on the chart previously. And there are not enough options. The City Housing Authority provides 564 affordable housing units and about 1,000 Section 8 vouchers. This is what the wait list looks like. There are 390 people on the wait list for affordable housing units and 213 for Section 8 vouchers. Additionally, HDC reports that 524 individuals are on their waiting list. And for some of their properties, their waiting lists have been closed for years, reflecting that affordable housing, that every affordable housing provider in our county has a waiting list for families that need housing now. With years-long waiting lists for hundreds of families, accessing affordable housing is akin to winning the lottery. This does not make any sense. Only 1 in 4 people who qualify for support receive anything. 3 out of 4 get nothing. Nationwide, there's a $98 billion with a B funding gap for affordable housing. There's just simply not enough, not even close. So what can we do? What can we do about this? Well, we can preserve the affordable housing that we have here in the city of Lancaster and figure out how we are going to produce more affordable housing. What I've learned is that in many cases, the most affordable housing is the home where you live right now. And the median property values here in the city are just over $100,000, which would be affordable at that median income if only everybody were at the median income. So one thing that we are working on is making sure that the properties that are here in the city are livable and safe, and that we are holding landlords to account. We are still going through a process of changing up our inspections from an every 4-year cycle to a 2-4-6 cycle, so that if you need us to be making sure and holding your hand to get every little thing done in that apartment so that it is a safe place for our residents to live, we're going to be visiting you every 2 years. If you're doing an outstanding job, we're going to give you our thanks, and we're going to tell you we're going to come every 6 years. And that is something that we are working through. We have been slowed in this process a little bit because of some bad news, good news. The bad news is that we have a lead poisoning rate that is higher than Flint, Michigan. That is the bad news. The good news is that we just received one of seven of the largest grants in the country to help eliminate lead poisoning in the 4 most impacted census tracts in our city, all of which are south of King. We will be bringing $11 million to these neighborhoods to assist property owners, renters, and homeowners alike in making the necessary repairs. We've been doing lead paint reduction for over 20 years. There are key staff in this room who are responsible for that. But if you don't know about lead poisoning, I have to tell you, this is our biggest environmental justice issue of our time. Children who are lead poisoned are permanently damaged. This is not temporary. They're impacted in many, many ways. Learning disabilities, lower IQs, attention deficit disorder, reduced educational achievement, reduced lifetime earnings. And the children, of course, who are most impacted are the poorest and the children of color who are our neighbors. They are my daughter's classmates. This has to stop. I'd like for you to hear from a resident about what the lead program has meant to her and her family.
Last year, my main sewer line broke. I didn't sign up for the rider, not knowing what was going to happen. So I had talked to my employer, and he said, "Did you ever think to reach out to the city for help?" And I said, "Why would the city help me?" When I was aware that there was a program called Critical Repair, I was shocked. I had no idea. So I applied for the program. They sent me a homeowner's package, and they were meeting with me in a matter of a couple weeks. In the process, they asked if I'd be interested in the lead remediation program, and I said, "I don't have lead. I know I don't have lead." So they suggested, "Let's just come in and test." They came in, and to my surprise, I had extreme amounts of lead levels. They replaced all the windows. They replaced doors that were contaminated. I have grandchildren. I had no idea that toddlers just walking or babies crawling. Like I said, I had no idea about lead. This program has totally opened my eyes to something that I never thought I'd care about. So I am so grateful for these programs.
So we're just getting started, and we will be rolling out much more about this program in 2020, and I encourage you to stay tuned, and we'll keep sharing updates as we make progress with a very bold goal that will have impact for generations to come, which is to eliminate lead paint in our city's homes. So the other side of this is, of course, that if you have the opportunity to have an apartment, we want to make sure that it's safe. And on the flip side, we want to increase the supply of affordable units that are available here in the city. We're a dense, historic, built-out city of just 7 square miles. And as a community, we need thousands of new affordable units for working families. Some of these units will absolutely come in the city of Lancaster. But honestly, more will need to come in the county. There is more space. It is cheaper to build because by and large, tax rates are lower in the county or out of the city. And, we are subject to different state requirements. We are operating under consent decree, and there are real implications for development here in the city as it relates to stormwater. So it's going to take a lot more township commissioners and supervisors approving projects to allow affordable housing in order for us to solve this crisis. The city alone cannot be the source of all of what is needed related to affordable housing. So this is an example of new housing, affordable housing that's being constructed that the city is a financial stakeholder in, and that is SACA. These are new units that will be built, constructed along Chesapeake Street. In most cases, the cost to build new units like this exceeds what an affordable rent would be. So we need things like an affordable housing fund to close the gap on projects. Let me just say that again. Hey, we need an affordable housing fund. Can we do that? We need to see more accessory dwelling units. We've changed our zoning to make it easier for people to add units in basements and garages. This is one way for us to increase the number of smaller units that are available in the city. And we need either incomes to go up or building costs to go down. That's the calculation. One of the only ways to reduce construction costs is with state and federal subsidies. At the state level, low-income housing tax credit projects are so competitive that developers, like the developer Presbyterian Homes here with Longcrest on Walnut Street, it took them 3 years to secure a low-income housing tax credit. Those tax credits max out at $1.2 million, which would facilitate about 45 or 60 units. And we are lucky if Lancaster County as a whole sees a single award each year. One. That means we would be building one 45 to 60 unit affordable project here in Lancaster County when we need thousands. The gap is so clear. So neighbors, this is the story in a nutshell that I want to leave you with tonight. For our residents, most are working and contributing to the success of our county's economic strength, and they are not realizing the benefit. More than half of renters are housing burdened, meaning that they are not saving for emergencies, retirement, education, for themselves or for their children. They are just not even able to participate in our local economy, to come and shop downtown, to go to our restaurants, to support our small businesses. For our government, we know that 30% of our properties are non-taxed, which means that 70% are carrying all the water. We have the highest concentration of poverty. We have the highest tax burden given the services we are mandated to provide and, that luxury of a stormwater fee. We have a structural deficit in which our expenses increase by an average of 3% and our revenues increase by an average of 1%. We cannot continue to tax the people who are the poorest with the least taxing capacity to address some of these problems. For our schools, we know that the school district of Lancaster is underfunded to the tune of $30 million a year. $30 million a year. This is an issue that so many people are talking about and actually unites us here in Lancaster County because there are other school districts who are not receiving their fair share. The fair funding formula is not being utilized in its totality, and so many districts in the county are receiving shrift. That adds a tremendous burden when you think about what our municipal tax rate is and our school district property taxes. If you own a property here in Lancaster, you do not need me to tell you this. We know that there are very real limits to what we can do. We know it. And especially on the big issues like housing, workforce development, and poverty, what I hear so much from our residents, these three issues are things that we talk about so frequently. We also know that at the local level, we are preempted from doing a lot of common sense things. At the same time, we can be an example of good government. This is our public works crew right here. They are out serving our city 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can be a model for engaged citizenry. We can be a model for intermunicipal cooperation, like between Manheim Township and our fire bureau. This is like once in a generation this has happened. Of creativity and innovation, using data to inform the decisions about how we use the limited resources that we have to more effectively and efficiently deliver services. And we need to push out from Lancaster City to the county, where taxes have been flat for a decade. A decade! Oh my gosh, I dream of not raising property taxes, you guys. The county government, we are all residents here in the county. We are all stakeholders, and we can be pushing out to the county to do more around transportation and housing, just to name two. To the state, we can be pushing out, where outdated policies don't allow us to do some common sense things, to give us some local control about our destiny, to help us relieve the property tax burden and come up with more equitable and sustainable ways to provide mandated public safety, police and fire services that we all rely on every single day. And finally, to Washington, D.C., we've got to push out. We have to have new ways to address these issues. We have to find new funding mechanisms to support affordable housing. And we desperately need help for our infrastructure. We need to make millions of dollars of improvements in our wastewater and our water facilities. Facilities like the $40 million that we're spending to build a redundant water line from the Susquehanna River into our water treatment plants. That's a $40 million project. Guess who's carrying the burden of that? We are. We need help. I want to share one more humbling statistic. These are our voting rates compared to the county and the state. The most vulnerable and marginalized community in our county, this one, ours, right here, is heard the least in all of the things we talked about tonight, in all of the things. So when we wrap up our Census 2020 work to ensure that everyone in Lancaster City is counted, to ensure that we receive our fair share of the very little bit of federal dollars that we get, we'll be shifting our efforts to voter registration and engagement in partnership with the YWCA, in partnership in celebration of the centennial of the suffragists, to make sure that Lancaster votes on par with the county and the state. We're going to use the voting rate as a metric on the city's dashboard so we can be reporting out to you about how we're doing, because we think that voter engagement is a measure of strong neighborhoods. And our performance dashboard, you'll be seeing more of it. We're going to be pushing it out later in the first quarter of 2020, so be sure to come back and check out all of the different metrics that we're working on. So here's my ask. Remember I said I have two things, right? Tonight, I want you to pledge to be a census champion. What that means is that you are going to complete your census survey when it arrives to you. You can do that by mail, you can do that by phone, and you can do that on a computer. And you can help spread the word through your networks to make sure that everyone knows that the census is safe, it is easy, and it is super duper important. That's number one. Number two, I want you to commit to getting just one more person, just one person registered to vote. Tonight, on your way out, you will be handed a voter registration form. And this is what I'm asking you to do, and I'm being very specific. I want you to take that voter registration form, and I want you to find somebody who is not registered to vote in the city of Lancaster. I want you to help them fill it out if they need help. I want you to put it in the mail for them if they need you to do that too. And then I want you to ask them for their phone number. And on election day, I want you to call them. And I want you to give them a friendly reminder to go out and vote. If everybody in this room does that, and I'm assuming all of you are registered to vote, and if you're not, you can take 2 or 3, whatever. Make sure everybody in your house is registered to vote. What that means is that this room is twice as full of voters when it comes time to make our voices heard on the issues that we care about in Lancaster City. Please join me in this effort. I ran for mayor in 2017 in part to demonstrate that we could do politics differently here, that we could have real discourse without demeaning each other. It's a novel concept. We could solve problems and improve the lives of our residents. We could be responsible stewards of our children's future through climate action planning. I believe we're doing these things, working together as a team to ensure that our local government is operating with integrity and respect to deliver quality services that our community relies on every day. These are our core values: quality, teamwork, integrity, and respect. These things are not just words on a screen, on a t-shirt, on a postcard that you might see floating around City Hall. This is what we do as your servants. And it is our honor to serve this community. And we thank you very much for being here tonight, for caring, for taking the time out to come and hear about the state of your city, the challenges, the successes, the possibilities. And now I invite you to join me at City Council at 7:30. And don't forget to take your voter reg form. And there's also information about the census outside. Thank you all for coming. It is truly an honor to serve as your mayor.